In this video, I'm going to break down the #1 mindset reason most coaches struggle. And when it comes to growth, almost everything is completely counter-intellectual. So watch this whole video because it has the potential to change the entire game for you. So if I had to boil it down to one thing that can apply in a bunch of different areas, that one thing is misconceptions. And I've long been saying misconception is a huge problem in personal development in general, that most people, I think, don't really understand the path to personal development, what's involved. I think part of it is because we wished it wasn't true. We don't want it to be challenging. We don't want it to be uncomfortable. You know, we just want a really simple, check the box kind of pattern and recipe. So that's one of the reasons that I think we have this misconception, is because we don't want the truth to be true. And the more that we resist the truth, the harder it is. You know, it's that some version of the classic saying, or I've heard various versions of it. It's something is, I think pain is mandatory, but suffering is optional. Something like that.
Suffering is optional, yes.
Yeah. So suffering is optional. And our suffering in the context of personal development and building a business is going to be relative to our relationship to the process. So if we don't like what the process is, then we're going to be irritated. We're going to be judging it. We're going to be trying to get ourselves out of it. And that's going to create more suffering. And my experience also is that when you are judging the process, especially related to time, it's taken too long. When you're judging the process and then searching for a shortcut, it'll go longer. So there's this counter-intellectual truth in my experience. And I think it's because it's not an intellectual journey. That's why it's counter-intellectual.
Oh, dang.
Because it's not an intellectual journey, the intellect doesn't understand it. And the process of evolution is not an intellectual journey. Whether we're talking about personal development kind of evolution or business evolution or evolving your message, evolving some kind of like signature marketing idea, you know, signature story, something like that.
Right.
It's not an intellectual process. So that's why I think the intellect doesn't understand. And you know this, I've been saying counter-intellectual now for maybe a year or two, because we use the word counterintuitive. And I think that's actually false.
Right. Yeah.
Our intuition, in my experience, is only correct 100% of the time. So when we say counterintuitive, what we're kind of saying is that the intuition doesn't know. Like the intuition thinks it's one way and it's really another way. It's probably the intellect that came up with that, counterintuitive.
Right.
Counterintuition. That's right. Exactly. Our narcissistic intellect, right? So I've been saying counterintuitive or counterintellectual for a while because our intellect thinks a certain thing, and so often it's not that thing. And I think anything that is related to growth and creation and evolution is going to be counterintellectual. So we want it to look a certain way, and if it doesn't look that way, then we decide that it is wrong. For instance, most of us think that, again, my experience in hearing all this conversation and the questions that we get asked over 17 plus years in this industry, so many of us wished that our brains could just get over or stop judging, stop the fear, stop the internal dialogue of doubts and insecurities. We think that we need to stop that, and then we get to take action and then make all our dreams come true. And the counter-intellectual truth is, it is neurologically impossible for your brain to not have fears. It's neurologically impossible. So if you're demanding that your brain doesn't have fear, you'll never take the next step, because that will never happen until the day your brain stops working. If you're demanding that your brain doesn't have the internal dialogue, that's not ever going to happen either. That's just the way the brain operates. So these misconceptions of we think that the path involves a certain thing, or we think it doesn't involve a certain thing, that are wrong, that sets us up to fail from the get-go. So if you think that part of this journey is getting rid of all your fears, especially if you think that's first step of your journey, well, then that's going to be a misconception that is not ever going to prove fruitful for you. It's not ever going to, allow you to do the work, because you're demanding something that's impossible. I don't think I've put the misconception. We haven't really talked about misconceptions specifically in the coaching journey. We've talked about all kinds of other stuff, and it certainly fits, but I don't know that we've just said, okay, here's the actual thing. So the different applications, I think, are important in this conversation. What are the misconceptions that so many of us have? And I would say the big one is just our expectations. And the misconceptions create the expectations, right? And we have misconceptions about the expectations. So these two feed off of each other. They create a little bit of a cycle. Not a little bit, a big one. So when we have misconceptions, then our expectations are based on our misconceptions, which means our expectations are also wrong.
We don't even realize that we're suffering because of our stories.
There's empowerment here. Yes.
Yes.
I know I'm jumping in over what you're saying, but there's empowerment here. Hopefully you didn't expect me not to, because that would have been a misconception.
Oh, no, I've met you.
The empowerment here is that if we understand that the suffering is actually created by our expectations that are placed on misconceptions, then we can change all of that.
That's right.
But we're not going to be able to change the expectations unless the misconceptions change. Because it's the misconceptions that then will form our expectations, that will then form all of our desires and the way that we think the path should look. So that's the exciting part about this, is if you have a target now on what's actually creating the problem, we can uncreate that problem. And so specifically, that is changing these misconceptions. What were you saying?
Yes, all of that. I love what you just said, because it so much has been the theme of the videos that we've done, of the mastery class, and really so much inside of what we teach in our trainings is we got to have the target on the right thing. And the intellect is a great distractor. I love that you said the narcissistic intellect, which, by the way, we will be talking about more. Love that. But the point of that, if you think about like the term like narcissist, right? It's to distract from what is, it's to deflect onto something else, right? So in that statement that you made that was so powerful, Sean, is that we're trusting the intellect to come up with the solution when the intellect is never going to take ownership or responsibility for its part in the problem, and it's always going to push away and deflect to something else. And we, inside of these expectations and misconceptions, we actually don't understand how the brain literally works. And I know you said literally impossible, and I just want to emphasize that some of the things that we are expecting our brain and ourselves to do are, in every sense of the word, absolutely literally impossible. So it's really important that we go back to the foundation, which Sean just said. As far as misconceptions are concerned, we have to shift the view and the opinion that is fundamentally incorrect. And once we do that, like, the whole rest of the expectations house will fall, because the problem is actually what our thinking is about the journey or about the results that we're supposed to be getting.
Yeah, that's such an important piece. It's not the existence of the fear that's the problem. It's our relationship to and our expectations of the fear. That's the problem. It's not the existence of our judging mind or the fact that we compare ourselves to others. It's our relationship to that. That is the problem. And what's awesome about that is, if the fear is the problem and the fear can't go away, well, then we're just stuck. Right. But if the fear isn't the problem, it's our relationship to the fear, and we can change our relationship to the fear, then we're not stuck. Then we can actually do something with the issue. We can actually do something with the problem. So the most common expectations that we see for people that want to be successful in coaching is all the shoulds that we put on ourselves. You know, it's this should be easy. This should be fast. I should be able to put up one Facebook post and a bunch of different people are going to buy my product, and it shouldn't be uncomfortable, and it should look like my journey should look like other people's journeys. All these shoulds are what create the suffering. Because if your journey should look like something better than it does, then you'll be miserable.
Yeah.
That's how the human brain generates misery. It's by comparing the current situation to something better. It's that simple. So if what you're experiencing is not as good as what you should be experiencing, well, that means you're failing. That means you're losing. That means you are a loser. That means you're incompetent. That means it'll never work for you. That means whatever our internal dialogue is saying, or monologue really is saying, and that's a function of what we're comparing our current circumstance to. But if we compare our current circumstance to something worse, we actually get the exact opposite. We don't get misery, we get gratitude. We might get excitement because the thing that we're experiencing is better than the way it could be. But most of us are, I think, wired to do this to some degree, but definitely programmed to take whatever is and compare it to something better, and then just stay in this state of perpetual misery. Now, the misery might be a low level of intensity. It might be a high level of intensity, but we're perpetually living in this, it's not fair. This isn't the way it should be. We should be doing better. And that doesn't inspire anybody that I know. It doesn't fuel us to keep going when we're constantly living in the this isn't good enough lens and frame. And it's because we're comparing our results to the ideal results. And sometimes those ideal results were sold to us by somebody else. Sometimes we generated them ourselves. We just decided this is the way it's supposed to be. But whatever that ideal is, it's not going to work out that way because it's ideal, right? So it's pretty much guaranteed that it won't work. And if we can continue to compare to the perfect ideal, we'll always be in this state of deficit.
Absolutely. I mean, what's the phrase? We're comparing our reality, right? Our behind the scenes footage to somebody else's highlight reel. It's absolutely ridiculous. Oftentimes, a lot of what we're comparing ourselves to is actually a lie. It's not even real. And we're holding ourselves up to these expectations that are completely unrealistic and that nobody actually is achieving or doing, but we think that they are. And so we think we're a loser because of it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of sadness in that where the expectations are actually impossible.
Right.
And yet we're demanding it. So they're either impossible or they're a lie, as you said. Either we're lying to us or somebody else is lying to us. Sure. And so we're setting ourselves up to compare against something that is not reality. And then when it doesn't work out that way, we've decided that we're doing it wrong.
Correct.
And most of the time, we're actually doing it right. Or let me say, I don't know, I'm not going to say most of the time we're doing it right. But when we are doing it right, in the context of building a business, coaching specifically, personal development, when we're doing it right, the intellect will try to convince us that we're doing it wrong. So almost all the time when the intellect decides that this is wrong, it's actually confirmation that it's right. Because to your point earlier, if the intellect is the narcissistic problem, then when it tries to convince us that we're doing it wrong, it is the problem based on its expectations. So if the problem says we're doing it wrong, then the not version of that basically means that we're probably doing it right.
Right.
You know, if the problem is telling us to stop doing this. And we're not saying that our intellect is a problem. We're just saying the way our intellect operates in this linear way of believing that personal development looks a certain way or business development looks a certain way. It's that line of thinking that is a problem. Our intellect is fantastically powerful when used in the right way, when fueled by our intuition, when not in competition with our intuition, then the intellect is incredibly important. But on its own, it's a disaster. And it's not going to solve the problem that it created, and it can't see in its own blind spots. So all of these expectations, it's like it's not the fault of the intellect, right? We kind of personify the intellect, which we did as a narcissist. It's not the fault of the intellect. The intellect is not intentionally malicious against us. It just doesn't know any better. It works exactly perfectly for what it's designed to do, and
Correct.
it's not designed to help us grow, and it's not designed to help us build a business, and it's not designed to help us create. It's just not designed for that stuff. So
Right.
we should not use it to assess our journey in those arenas. That's the big problem.
Absolutely. A hammer has its place, but I don't use one to brush my teeth.
You ever tried that?
No. But you can. Let me know how it goes.
Okay, thank you. I will. I will try that. And with a hammer, you just swing really hard, right?
Yeah, I could
Okay,
show you.
yeah.
I can help you, like with the first
Okay.
time. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
So the reality is, and this is coming from 17 plus years of personal development for me, but also 11 plus years or so in helping coaches specifically.
Yes.
So this is looking back at what works and what doesn't work, and why people struggle and why people quit. And the majority of the time, it's because they have misconceptions around what the process is supposed to look like. So they convince themselves they're doing it wrong. And then they look for the right answer. And quite often they come off of the right path because it's uncomfortable and it doesn't match the ego's expectations. They leave the right path in search of the right answer.
Oh my gosh. I can't. Wow.
What can't you?
Like just that concept, right? So like we're actually doing the right thing, right? We're going in the right direction. We're taking the action that is actually aligned with us and that feels good, but we are so committed to knowing all of the unknowable things that we stop doing the thing that's actually working to get off and say, oh, I've got to find this other thing that actually doesn't exist. And then in that, we delay the whole entire process because we've actually hopped off of the path. And the only thing that's going to be in that detour is just brambles and thorns and potholes, because that right answer, actually the only place that it can be found is at the end of the path that we stepped off of to go and search for the thing that doesn't exist.
So what does this mean in practical terms that so many of us are dealing with? It means if you think about doing something and you doubt whether you have the ability to, you're on the right path. If you think about doing something and you do not doubt your ability to do it, that something will not grow you. It cannot grow you, because the only time that you wouldn't doubt whether you can do something is if it's in your comfort zone. So the existence of doubt is a required part of the process for all of us, I think. If you question whether you should do this path or that path, that's good. That means your brain is wondering which way you should go, and your brain really cares. A lot of the problems that so many of us are experiencing are based on us actually really caring a lot. That's why we don't want to make the wrong choice. That's why we want to make sure that we have all the answers before we go out and put ourselves out there in the big, scary world. Because what if they ask questions that we can't answer? It's a sign that we care. So that's okay. But demanding that your brain get over this desire or the need to know the right thing to do when you've got several choices to make, that's the problem. Because that won't ever happen. It's literally impossible to know the right thing to do unless you do all of them and then come back to this moment in time, and now you know which, what the outcomes are for each of the choices, and then you can say, oh well, this one worked out better than the others, so this is now the right one. That's not possible. So waiting for your intellect to give you permission based on its demand for guarantees and knowing the right answers and never being in any kind of a risk, that's the problem. So when you have three things and you don't know which one to do one of them.
Yeah,
That's the answer. Just do one of them. And what we see so many times with people in the coaching world is we have this new program or a new idea or a new market or a new something, and we don't know the right way to position it, or we don't know the right way to price it or the right something. And the answer is just get out there and do something. Like you've got to get feedback from the action, especially when you don't know the outcome of the action. But you must be willing to take ignorant action.
Mm-hmm.
You must be willing to take action when you don't know the answer. That's part of the process. There are certain muscles that cannot be built any other way. But if our intellect is in charge, our intellect says, no, I have to know the process because I need to know how to pack. I need to know what to avoid. I need to know exactly how much time it's going to take. I need to know. So the need to know is something that you just got to let go of. If you need to know, then you can't build a business. You're not going to be able to grow your messaging or anything that's creative. You're not going to be able to grow personally if you demand that you need to know. And that's what the ego is demanding all the time. I need to know. I need to know. I need to know. So it's essentially that piece that we need to remove, and then we can go forward. So to what you said earlier, like we always want to give something to do about this. So how do we actually do this? Well, I just gave you one of them. If you have a bunch of options and there's no way for you to tell which option is the right one, then just pick any of them.
Right.
Because it truly doesn't matter. If you don't know which one is the right one, then just pick one and go.
Right.
And sometimes you might recognize that this path isn't what you want to continue. And that could happen later that day or a couple of weeks later. And then you just choose again. So the second thing I would say is give yourself the permission to make new choices every time you get new information. That's such an elementary concept, but most of us don't do that. Most of us approach all of our choices as final life and death choices. Like, I need to make the right choice because I'll never be able to change my mind going forward.
Right.
And that just pressurizes everything and makes it so much more difficult to make choices. And it almost guarantees that we'll make the wrong choices because we're so scared of making the wrong choices.
Mm-hmm. And then we're also holding our breath and waiting for the bad thing to happen from the wrong choice that we've made. So we're actually looking for the bad thing that's going to happen. We're not even focused on the possibility or the excitement or the good things that could happen from that decision.
Right.
Yeah.
So 2 more things, I think, and then if there's anything else that comes to your mind or my mind, we'll share it, obviously. One of them is about your commitment. Commit long-term. If you're pressurizing your short-term results, meaning if I do this video, I need to get a coaching client out of it, or I need to get a certain number of shares or engagement or what have you, you're going to put a lot of pressure on this particular video. And then this video is a win or loss by itself. Or a Facebook post is a win or loss by itself. Or a coaching consultation is a win if they say yes, it's a loss if they say no. When you pressurize every one of your steps as a win or a loss, then you'll experience the devastation of a loss with every step. Or you'll be thinking about the potential devastation of the loss with every step. And so it'll be harder to take these steps. But if you just say, I'm going to commit to this for 2 years, and this video means literally nothing in the grand scheme of things other than what am I going to learn from it? So if you have this 2-year commitment, let's say, and you know that it doesn't matter what your results are, you're doing this work for 2 years because you committed to doing it for 2 years. It doesn't matter if nobody engages ever. It doesn't matter if nobody buys anything that you have to sell. You're committed for 2 years. The way you operate inside of those 2 years without the conditional commitment, which is what most of us have, the way you operate inside those 2 years will be different than if every single thing you do has to win. Yep. So opening up your long-term commitment is really, really critical. And then you just say, I'm learning here. This is market research. I'm in for this period of time, and then I'm going to track the results and then see what I can do to change, if anything, if I don't get the results that I'm looking for.
It's the difference between committed until and committed unless.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Right. And most people are committed unless. I'm committed unless it takes time, unless it takes money, unless it's uncomfortable. But if it's not uncomfortable and it's like easy and free and guaranteed, I'm totally committed.
Right.
Yeah. 100% committed, unless there's a misconception mixed in there.
Right.
So this last one is to identify your quitting point. This is a deep one.
Yeah.
Identify your quitting point. What will make you stop? And whatever that answer is, then live by it. I think most of us are intellectually committed, but not emotionally committed to the same things. We'll say, "Oh, I'm in it for the long haul. It doesn't matter. I'm in it. I got to do this thing. This is what my life, this is my purpose." And then, but why won't you do the video? Well, what if somebody doesn't like it?
Right.
So then those aren't matching.
Right.
And if you can identify what your quitting point is, then don't quit until that thing happens.
Correct. It's there regardless of whether you identify it or not. So you might as well call it out and bring it to the surface. And I would say it's there maybe actually, I'm gonna sit with this. I think we all have it, right? We're all in on something unless it costs you what? So if it's there and it's already operating, shine a light on it, bring it out.
Know about it.
Yeah, bring it out. Let's be real about it, because we can all say, "Oh, I would never." Okay, but let's just pretend that you would. What would it be? And then once we bring our attention to it and it's in the forefront, just like we talk about with so many other concepts, we have no control over something that we don't actually admit or acknowledge is present. And the denial of reality gives us zero control over what is actually happening. So let's be real. Do you have 1 year? Do you have 2 years? Do you have 10 years? Are you good unless 10 people tell you no, or 100 people tell you no, or it doesn't work within a certain time period? Just the more we can be honest about what's actually operating, the more self-control and not just of self, like as the body, but also our actions, the more in control we are of those things, because we're not pretending that something that is really there isn't.
Are you saying that denying reality doesn't work?
Well, I tried it for a really long time, and no, it doesn't. Not in my experience. But maybe I just wasn't working hard enough.
You weren't taking enough bubble bath.
Probably.
You were probably apologizing.
Clearly, that was my problem. Yeah.
That's what you needed to stop.
Yeah.
So to wrap this up, the truth that we've experienced is that most people are stopping themselves based on expectations that are wrong, because they're based on misconceptions, and the misconceptions is based on misinformation. Usually it's based on information that's not wrong, or that's not right. So we're taking information that's incorrect, making conceptions that's incorrect, then making expectations that are all false. And then when it doesn't go that way, then we get frustrated and struggle and suffer and potentially quit. So I would say the majority of the people who are experiencing a lot of the internal disruption and discomfort that none of us enjoy. The human brain does not enjoy discomfort. It doesn't enjoy the experience of emotions, usually like negative emotions releasing. It doesn't enjoy a lot of these experiences. So it's not about having fun through this process. But what I was going to say is that most people that are experiencing those things are actually doing it right.
Yeah.
But they've convinced themselves they're not, therefore they quit. Or they just delay the process to a large degree. And it's frustrating to us sometimes, all the time, when we see that, because Like we just want to, we just want people to know, if you only knew, you're actually on the right path. If you only knew you're on the right path, then you'd be able to do this. And one of the reasons that a lot of people don't have this internal connection or drive to continue going is confidence, and at a deeper level, certainty about this work. So there's not the conviction to keep going. If our conviction is low, then we'll get knocked out of the game easier than when our conviction is super high. And one of the main reasons is that we just don't know this work. We don't really fully believe in it. We don't believe in it because we haven't experienced it, or we don't believe in it because we haven't experienced our ability to lead inside of it, to teach it, to coach with it, to speak it. So our lack of conviction and our ability to do this work is going to be a huge piece of sabotage that's going to stop most of us. So anything you want to add to that?
It's highly likely that you're not only doing like a good job, it's highly likely that you're further ahead than most people. So my invitation to you is look to the intuition of the person in the mirror instead of the expectations of the people out the window. If you would just put your head down, I promise you, just put your head down energetically, right? Not literally. Energetically put your head down and just keep going. Most of the struggles that we face are because instead of just going with the idea or the thing that we have, we're debating if it's right, we're wondering if it's wrong, we're looking over here for confirmation, and we're looking to people who don't even have the capacity to be able to assess whether it's actually right for us because they're not us or they're not doing the same thing that we are. And in our looking to the left and to the right, we fall off of the path that would have been the right path. And now we're trying to get ourselves back, wipe off our bruises from telling ourselves how dumb we are, and then get going again. When if we just would put our head down and stay consistent with it, just stay with it, you would be amazed at what is actually truly possible instead of doing the thing and then looking for the results, and then doing the thing and then looking for the results. That stop and start is just exhausting. And it's I think one of the big reasons inside of this conversation that we get so frustrated is that comparison and taking ourselves off of the aligned right thing that we're already doing.
Yeah, that's deep. It's profound. It's our experience as the biggest thing that stops most people is the expectations and the comparisons that's actually based on the wrong information. In this world, in this society, in this coaching arena, if you really want to be a transformational agent, you have to understand transformation. You have to experience transformation. And there's no such thing as comfortable transformation. Nope. Now, if you just want to sell widgets, if you just want to sell information, that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And then you could maybe avoid some of this stuff, at least as it relates to the product that you're selling. Sure. But if you want to be a transformational agent where you really, truly want to change people's lives, then you've got to be a product of that product. You've got to be a student of the process of transformation. And the more that you dig into the study of the work, the easier it will be for you to be more convicted. The easier it will be for you to be more confident and certain. Everything is learnable. That's the cool thing. Everything is learnable. Absolutely. And just because we don't currently know something doesn't mean that it's not learnable. And the cool thing is human transformation is 100% learnable. Yes. If you're willing to go through the process and you're willing to keep studying and you're willing to have long-term focus and you're willing to have the until commitment and all the things that we talked about, then it's absolutely learnable and doable. Now, if you like this video, check out that video right there. We're going to talk about the most important secret to growing your coaching business. Okay, what I'm about to say, get this. A lot of the lessons that you need to learn can only be learned inside of ignorance.